fire that burns 60 years later, a thriving community turned into a ghost town, and the inspiration for a horror film. All that and more on this week's ancient journey, Centralia is burning. But before we begin, don't forget, if you enjoy our content, hit that like button, share the video, and subscribe. Now let's get started. There's a vast expanse of wilderness in the mountains of central Pennsylvania, inhabited by several Native American tribes of the region. As colonial settlers slowly expand westward, the Native American tribes will sell their land for the sum of just 500 English pounds in 1749. As the settlers begin their expansion in the region, they survey and begin to build trails and roads in the area. And in 1793, Revolutionary War hero Robert Morris would acquire a parcel of land located in Columbia County, Pennsylvania. Morris would soon be bankrupt, and the land would be put up for auction and purchased by a former French sailor named Stephen Girard. Girard paid a sum of $30,000 to purchase the land in 1830, having heard the area was rich in coal deposits. Girard did very little with the area. In fact, the only thing the area was known for was a tavern called the Bull's Head. The tavern gave the area its first name. People called the town Bull's Head. The Locust Mountain Coal and Iron Company would purchase the land in 1842. One of their mining engineers, Alexander Ray, would move his family there and draw up plans for a town with streets and individual building lots for sale. Ray would try to rename the town to Centerville, Pennsylvania, hoping that the town would become a center of commerce in the area. But when he learned of another town in the area named Centerville, Ray would choose another name for the town he wished to be the central hub of the area, and he would name the town Centralia. By 1854, the Mine Run Railroad was completed, allowing a means of transport of goods to and from the area. And soon, massive quantities of the region's anthracite coal would be moving from mines to mountains to market in the area. Small mining camps began to spring up in the surrounding woods, and people began to flood into Centralia. In 1856, the Locust Run Mine and Coal Ridge mines would open. The Centralia Mine and Continental Mine would open in 1863. By 1866, the population of the area had soared to 1,300 people, and as the number of mines increased, so too did the number of labor uprisings. A local group of Irish American miners formed a gang known as the Molly Maguires. The legends of the Molly Maguires become part of the fabric of folklore in the area. On October 17th, 1868, Alexander Ray meets his fate at the hands of the Molly Maguires when he is murdered by the gang while traveling between Centralia and the neighboring town of Mount Carmel. Ray would not live to see Centralia continue to bloom into the late 1800s. The town's population would increase to nearly 3,000. Centralia would come home to 5 hotels, 27 saloons, 7 churches, 2 theaters, a bank, a post office, and 14 general stores. The massive amount of anthracite coal in the ground beneath Centralia would bring what seemed to be limitless prosperity to the area. As World War I begins, Centralia begins to suffer, as many of the miners would leave the towns and become involved fighting in the war. Coal output would continue to decline from a lack of employees, and a series of labor strikes would continue to weaken coal output after the war had ended. A cheaper alternative to coal came to market, further pushing coal production lower. Cheap fuel oil became a popular alternative. When the stock market crashes in 1929, the Lehigh Valley Coal Company would close 5 of its mines in and around Centralia. As Centralia floundered during the tough economic times of the Depression, resourceful miners would turn to any way they knew how to make money. One of these methods was known as bootleg mining, where individual miners would enter abandoned mines and extract the coal from them. The unsafe bootleg miners' techniques would often result in mine collapses and ground subsidence. Centralia was offered a slight glimmer of hope as World War II broke out and the demand for coal increased. The population of Centralia had actually decreased by this time to just under 2,000 people. Anthracite mining in the region continued, but by 1960, nearly all of the remaining mining companies in the area had shut down. The Knox mine disaster in 1959 had signaled the death knell for mining in Pennsylvania when a mining company had illegally mined beneath the Susquehanna River, puncturing a hole in the riverbed and killing 12 people, along with flooding many of the local mine shafts. The hole in the river was so large it had to be plugged with railroad cars. The incident had poisoned the public's taste for mining, and soon the industry in the area was practically dead. But Centralia remained, and while it wasn't the boom town it once had been, it was still as pleasant a small town as any in the United States at the time. In May of 1962, the Centralia Town Council meets to discuss their approaching Memorial Day celebration and how the town could go about cleaning up their small landfill. The Centralia Tan landfill was a 300-foot by 75-foot pit that had been an old strip mine cleared out in the 1930s by a miner named Edward Whitney. The landfill came close to the northeast corner of the Oddfellows Cemetery in town. Centralia had created the landfill to limit illegal dumping in the area. There were several illegal dumping areas nearby, and the thought was that a centrally maintained landfill would eliminate the problem. A law from 1956 in Pennsylvania had required that any strip mine used for landfills require a permit and regular inspections. And the reason for this was that landfills and strip mines were known to create destructive mine fires. Inspections of the Centralia strip mine had raised concerns when holes in the walls and floors were found, indicating that the mine was possibly cutting into several other older mines beneath the ground. It was determined that the pit would need to be filled with a material that could not burn to avoid a tragedy. The minutes from the town council meeting do not outline the process to make the mine safer. Instead, the meeting minutes only describe a cleanup, never mentioning the burning of the items in the landfill since it was prohibited. But the council does set a date and hires 5 members of their volunteer fire company to clean up the landfill on May 27th, 1962. The volunteers set fire to the contents in the dump on May 27th and use fire hoses to douse any remaining flames that they see before nightfall. But 2 days later, the flames have popped up in the landfill again. So those flames are doused with water and extinguished. But the next week, the flames have appeared again. So a bulldozer is brought in so firefighters can stir up the trash and douse it with water. A few days of bulldozing finally uncover the cause of the flames. a 15-foot wide hole is discovered. The hole had been obscured by garbage and had never had any non-combustible material placed into it. This hole had allowed a pathway for the fire to enter into the labyrinth of old coal mines beneath the landfill. The landfill continues to burn, no matter how much it is stirred up or how much water is added to it. Testing equipment is brought in, and it's determined that the carbon monoxide levels in the air are consistent with the levels found during a mine fire. Realizing what has happened, the Centralia Town Council sends a letter to the Lehigh Valley Coal Company as a formal notice of a mine fire. But the council hides the details of their landfill fire, telling the coal company that the fire had appeared from an unknown origin during excessively hot summer weather. From this point forward, any attempts to quench the fire only make things worse. Excavations to determine the extent of the fire only allow more oxygen into the mine and push the fire deeper into the coal seam and further away from its origins. There are several attempts to dig up the fire or to punch test holes into the ground. All of these projects would run out of money and only make things worse. By 1963, steam rising from openings in the ground indicate that the fire has spread some 700 feet away from the original landfill. And it's sort of hard to believe, but the town sort of just goes about its business for the next decade or so, knowing that the fire was beneath them and seeing the wisps of smoke rising from the ground or the bluish flames popping up. It's hard to imagine, but the residents of the town just seemed ready to live with the mine fire as it was. After all, it had to go out sometime, didn't it? It's November of 1979, and John Coddington looks at the vacant lot next to his gas station in Centralia and notices steam rising from it. Coddington's gas station is several hundred feet to the east of the original landfill. A few weeks later, Coddington is in the basement of his gas station and notices steam rising from the basement floor. When he touches it, the floor feels warm to the touch. He measures the temperature of the basement floor and finds that it is 136 degrees Fahrenheit. Coddington's gas station has 4 underground gas tanks which hold around 9,000 gallons of gasoline. A thermometer is lowered into one of the tanks, and he finds that the gasoline is even hotter than the basement floor was. The gasoline measures 172 degrees Fahrenheit. Coddington's gas station is one of the first buildings to be demolished because of the fire. In 1980, years of living near the fire begin to take a toll on the health of the residents. Long-term exposure to carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and low oxygen levels have made people sick. And the mine fire is brought to the nation's attention when a sinkhole opens in 1981 and nearly swallows a child playing in his yard. 12-year-old Todd Dombowski only survives by clinging to a tree root and being pulled out by a cousin. The sinkhole that almost claims his life is measured at 150 feet deep, and the hot steam that pushes from the sinkhole contains a lethal level of carbon monoxide. In 1984, evacuation efforts of Centralia begin. Buyout offers are given by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania to residents, and most residents accept, but some decide to stay behind. In 1992, the Commonwealth claims eminent domain, effectively taking ownership of Centralia. and in 2002, the Postal Service revokes the zip code of the town. In 2009, a formal eviction of the town begins. Just 5 occupied homes remain by that time. After some lawsuits, in 2013, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania reaches an agreement with the remaining residents, allowing them to live out their lives in Centralia, after which the rights of their properties would be taken by eminent domain. The Centralia mine fire extends a few miles to the south under the town of Burnsville, and that town is also abandoned and leveled. Centralia becomes a tourist attraction, with people coming to see the smoke and the empty streets and the abandoned sections of Route 61, a blocked highway that is now covered in colorful graffiti. Heavy rainfalls in the area that leak into mines, combined with the heat of the fire of the Centralia mine fire, have created Pennsylvania's only geyser, the Big Mine Run geyser. In 2006, the movie Silent Hill draws on the events of the mine fire, as the movie is set in a town abandoned due to a massive coal seam fire. Centralia still burns today at an estimated 400 to 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It is one of 38 active mine fires in Pennsylvania. Yes, the Centralia mine fire is not alone. And according to the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, the mine fire could burn for another 100 years before it runs out of fuel. Thanks for watching, and thanks for sharing the journey.